Hola y bienvenidos a una lección de un uso nuevo del subjuntivo. So we have a new use of the subjunctive, and it's called the subjunctive non-existent and undefined antecedents. And a fancy word for that is like, how do I say that? It's adjectival? No, wait. I call them adjective clauses, and I can't remember why on this PowerPoint it's that crazy word. So anyway, so that's a lot of grammatical language. So to simplify things, this will be like, to shorten it up in class, we'll call it non-existent or lo indefinido. Lo indefinido is probably what you saw in the Sophia tutorial. So that just means like the undefined. Now, as far as the word antecedent, I'm going to clear that up for you before we even get started, because it's one of those grammar words that looks all scary and like, what the heck is that? I never learned what an antecedent is. And I can show you right here simply with one sentence what an antecedent is. So we have the sentence, tengo una casa que es muy grande y roja. The word casa is the antecedent, meaning that it is a word that is further modified in the rest of the sentence. So it's not just I have a house, it's I have a house that's very big and red. So the rest of that sentence, which is the adjective clause, it's an adjective clause because that all of that language modifies the word casa. Antecedent is just a fancy word for the noun that's modified. That's all that it means. It just means that the noun that is modified by the rest of the sentence. So we have an adjective clause. It is also referred to as the subordinate clause. Okay, our main clause is I have a house. The subordinate clause is that is very small and red. So that is a subordinate clause, an adjective clause. The antecedent just being the noun that is modified by the adjective clause. So we have a special subjunctive that when we have this antecedent that is indefinite or non-existent, or if it is uncertain, we will then use the subjunctive in the adjective clause. So I think it sounds a little wordy, it sounds a little grammatical, but I think you'll see after just a few short slides that it's pretty straightforward, and you'll be able to master it pretty quickly. So let's talk about the subjunctive use a little bit. So the subjunctive is used in the subordinate clause or the adjective clause. That's the same thing. If the antecedent, that's the noun that is being modified in the main clause, does not exist, it is uncertain, or it's indefinite in the speaker's mind. So let me give you a few examples so you can see what I'm talking about here. So, first thing says, no hay un carro que pueda comprar. Soy muy pobre. So there isn't a car that I can buy. I'm very poor. So that car doesn't exist. So the fact that I can buy it doesn't exist either. So therefore it has to be used in the subjunctive. Remember, the subjunctive is everything that is outside of our realm of reality. And this car doesn't exist in my world, so it's not reality. Another example is, here's a question. It's an uncertain question. Hay una tienda que venda iPods viejos. So it says, is there a store that sells old iPods? So I'm uncertain if that store exists or not. And so then therefore the selling of the old iPods also is not certain. So therefore has to be handled by the subjunctive. I also have another example here where I'm talking about an indefinite person. So, necesito una mujer que cocine bien. I need a woman that cooks well. I'm not being specific on who she is. I'm just saying she's an indefinite woman. I'm not saying I need the woman. I need a woman. Any old woman. I don't care. As long as she can cook well. So, that una mujer is indefinite. And notice how we use an indefinite article una there to indicate that it's an indefinite antecedent. So in all of those, the bolded noun is the antecedent, and the red verb, and I missed that on cocine, is the subjunctive because it is part of the adjective clause that is modifying the antecedent. So I'll break that down into a few more slides, and I'll show you the key words that you need to kind of identify. I don't want to use the word trigger because they're not trigger verbs, but they will help us identify when we use the subjunctive. So, first of all, is I when it's a question, because we're trying to figure out, we're not certain if something exists. So, here's a couple examples. Hay un restaurante que sirva comida francesa. So, I'm asking, is there a restaurant that serves French food? I'm uncertain if that restaurant exists. I'm sure that I know that there are restaurants out there in the world that serve French food, but I don't know if it's near me. I don't know if it's within driving distance. I don't know if they're open tonight. I don't know if it even exists anywhere around or if I can even afford it. So all of those things make it uncertain. So anything that modifies the restaurant has to be in the subjunctive. Another one is, hay un doctor que esté por aquí. This is a Spanish equivalent of, is there a doctor in the house? So, hay un doctor, so is there a doctor that is around here? Okay, so that is around here is modifying the doctor that is not certain, so therefore the verb cannot be certain either. Cannot be indicative, has to be subjunctive. And I have one more here. Hay un estudiante que quiere usar el subjuntivo. So is there a student that wants to use the subjunctive? I don't know if that student exists right now. I'm asking. I'm uncertain about the existence of that student. So then therefore, they're wanting to use the subjunctive has to be in the subjunctive. So I as a question often triggers the subjunctive. When I is negative in a statement, it will also, whatever's in the adjective clause will also be in the subjunctive, because if I say there isn't, that means it doesn't exist. No hay literally means it doesn't exist. There isn't. So, no hay ningún restaurante que venda comida francesa. So here I'm saying there isn't any. Ningún mean any. There isn't any restaurant that sells French food. So that selling French food, it's modifying restaurant, has to be in the subjunctive. Versus, here's the same sentence in the indicative. Sí, hay dos restaurantes que venden comida francesa, there we go, aquí. So I'm saying there are two restaurants that sell French food around here, okay? So once I say there are, they bring themselves into existence, and you can see venden comes from the verb vender, and it is in the indicative. All right, the indefinite articles, I mentioned that earlier, where it says, I need a woman that cooks. So if I'm looking at an indefinite article, it's because the existence of the antecedent is indefinite, and then therefore whatever modifies it will be in the subjunctive. So I have a sentence, necesito una mujer que hable ruso. Ruso is Russian. So it's indefinite. It's like, I need a woman that speaks Russian. Like, I need someone who speaks Russian. I'm walking in, I don't know if they exist. So the speaking has to be in the subjunctive as well. I often say this in class. I'll say, hay alguien que no termine. I'll say, is there anyone that isn't finished? And I'll use terminar in the subjunctive. So that's one way I've used it in class. I don't know if you've ever heard that or paid attention to it, but I have used it in class too. Here's an example of when we have identified this woman, we know she speaks Russian. It says, I need the woman that speaks Russian. Necesito a la mujer que habla ruso. Notice how subtle it is. The first sentence is in una. The second sentence is la, using a definite article equals indicative. So this is a very subtle subjunctive. It's not as obvious as the trigger verb one, okay? So it's kind of subtle, but I don't think it's really that complicated. Okay, so be careful. A word about personal I's. Now, personal I's are always an issue with us. However, here you kind of get a pass. The personal I is not used with a direct object noun that refers to a hypothetical person. So let's compare on the right here. We have an indicative and a subjunctive sentence. So the very first sentence is the subjunctive sentence. This is a non-existent antecedent. So it says, busco una mujer que sepa francés. I'm looking for a man who knows French. I don't know the particular person. I'm just saying I'm looking for this person. I don't know if they exist. So if that's the case, notice how I don't have a personal I. Non-real people don't get personal I's. Only real people get personal I's. So the existent antecedent is busco al señor que sabe francés. I walk into a room, I know there's a guy here who speaks French. I have to give him a personal I. Busco al señor. I'm looking for the man que sabe, that knows French. He exists to me, so then therefore he gets a personal I, and he gets the indicative. So when you're using the subjunctive, you don't need to get a personal I. So that would be like, you know, you get one pass there finally. Here's a couple more examples just to kind of, clarify this a little bit more. Here we're looking for a woman that cooks sweets, pastries, okay? So we don't care who, we're just looking for someone who does. So buscamos una mujer. She doesn't exist particularly, so she doesn't get a personal I. However, the next one, we're looking for Mary Fernandez. And Mary Fernandez, she's got a name, she's a real person. She cooks the best pastries in the entire world. So buscamos a Mary Fernandez que cocina los pasteles más ricos del mundo. So you can see there, cocina is in the indicative, and Mary Fernandez gets a personal I. So once we name her, she gets a personal I, and she gets the indicative. Okay? All right, so to kind of clear this up, just to explain it one more time. So this concept is referring to situations when you're looking for, you're wishing for, you're wanting, you're not seeing something or someone that you want. You would use the subjunctive after K in the adjective clause to describe something that you want but you don't know if it exists. So here's another example. I told you we're going to play around with this like one ad sort of thing. So it says, I want a boyfriend who's tall, dark, he's a total babe, and he likes to ride horses. This is obviously not me, I hate horses, but anyway, I just borrowed this from an online example. So here it says, quiero un novio. He's not a specific boyfriend, so he doesn't get a personal A. Que sea alto, moreno. Tremendo bizcocho is slang for like total babe. Okay, bizcocho really means cupcake, but that's slang for he's a total babe. Y que le guste montar a caballo. Notice how sea and guste are in the subjunctive because this boyfriend doesn't exist. Okay. So, I use the subjunctive here because I really don't know currently a person exactly like this. However, if I see a guy that fits this description, like he walks in, okay, I can point him out to my friends and I can say, hey, look, I want to meet that guy who's tall and dark and who likes to ride horses. And then all of a sudden, because he's walked in the room, he's suddenly in the indicative. He's within my realm of reality. So, quiero conocer al hombre que es alto, moreno, y a quien le gusta montar a caballo. So you can see everything switches to the indicative, and you can also see the personal a in al there. Okay? And then one more explanation. So if I'm describing an employee who already works for me, I would use the indicative. If I'm an employer describing the type of employee I want to find, I would use the subjunctive. Again, think want ads. Want ads are all the subjunctive. I also use the subjunctives when I describe people who don't exist or who I believe don't exist. So for example, if I point out that there's no one who can write in 15 languages, I use the subjunctive. Anytime I start a sentence with no hay nadie, or no hay nada, or no hay ningún. We'll talk about ningún and ninguna in class, okay? If there's no one, no I have to use the subjunctive because I'm describing someone who doesn't exist, except maybe in my wishful thinking, and wishful thinking is all subjunctive, okay? The indicative can only be used for real events. Okay, so a little bit of practica here, so you'll want to pause, okay? And I'm just going to float in I'm just going to pick the right verb. So we're going to take a look at each one, all right? So I would pause and do this by myself, so I'll give you a second to do that. Okay, so now when you come back, you'll want to check your answers. So number one says, no hay nadie. So there isn't anyone that has more physical problems than Dolores. So that my flag right there is no hay nadie, so I should pick tenga, okay, because there isn't anyone, so they can't exist. Preferimos ir a un restaurante que no either sirve or sirva comida rápida. So we prefer to go to a restaurant that doesn't serve fast food. So notice how my red flag is un restaurante. So we just prefer to go to a restaurant that doesn't serve. No sirva would be the subjunctive, so it doesn't serve fast food. We're not being specific about which restaurant. Okay. Number three, necesito hablar con el estudiante que sepa hablar francés. I'm saying I need to talk with the student that knows how to speak French. So since it is the student, that is definite, and I would say sabe. Number four says, quiero casarme con un hombre que, so I would get married to a man that is smart and adventurous. So notice how I'm saying to a man, not to the man, like I'm in a room full of men and there's that one who's intelligent and adventurous, and that's the one I want to marry. I'm just saying I want to marry a man. So un hombre is indefinite, so I should pick sea. And then number five is estoy buscando a la mujer que. So I'm looking for the woman that practices karate. So since I'm looking for that specific woman, la mujer, I would pick practica. Okay? So I hope that clears up what I mean by subjunctive using indefinite or non-existent antecedents. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those in on the Google form at the very bottom where I ask you if you need to leave me any comments or any questions. I'll make sure that I address them in class. Okay, gracias.